Hello, good afternoon and good evening, or good morning, actually. Yeah, from different places. Thank you very much. We just had a lunch for those who just recently joined us. We had a lunch break, and so the first panel will start now. It's nice that our panelists are all there. So I'll briefly introduce our panelists. The first one is Professor Washma Usman. Professor Usman is a filmmaker and associate professor at the Klein College of Media and Communication at Temple University. She authored books and have done research about Afghanistan media. In her book, Television in the Afghan Culture Wars, brought to you by foreigner warlords and activists, published by University of Illinois Press, 2020. She analyzes the impacts of international funding in cross-border media flows and the culture and politics of Afghanistan, the region, and beyond. She is also the co-author of Postcards from Tora Bora, Documentary Educational Resources, 2007, and the co-author of the forthcoming book, Afghanistan, A Very Short Introduction, Oxford University, forthcoming maybe next year for 2015. For the 2023 and 24 academic year, she's a joint visiting scholar with the Center for Media at Risk and the Center for Advanced Research in Global Communication. She has appeared as a commentator on Democracy Now!, NPR, and Al Jazeera, and works with community and activist groups. Once again, thank you very much, Professor Usman. Now, the next panelist, Professor Abdul Qahar Jawad. Associate Professor Jawad has been a lecturer at the Communication and Journalism School of Kabul University since 2005. He holds a master's degree in journalism, communication, and public relations from the University of Arkansas of the United States through a Fulbright program 2011-2012. Professor Jawad has obtained his bachelor degrees in journalism from Kabul University in 2004. Professor Jawad has 18 years of teaching experience in journalistic activities. He has worked in many capacities at different organizations, including the organizations of Afghan alumni, as operational director, coordinator, Institute for War and Peace Reporting, deputy country director, Subud News Agencies, a media advisor, Ministry of Foreign Education, executive assistant, and Kilit Media Group's reporter. He's been a senior communication consultant at the UN International Labour Organization and a media trainer at BBC Media Action since July 2022. Mr. Jawad served as a coordinator for Dutch Welle Academy in the past. Moreover, Professor Jawad is the founder of Jawad Fastidious Translating Association, which was founded in 2007, I think. They provide services in Dari Pashto in English. Professor Jawad was a project manager for Kabul Journalism Conference. I think it was 2013, where they were developing a standardized or unified national framework for journalism curriculum in Afghanistan. He also voluntarily cooperated for different developing and research committee of Kabul universities, including research, financial sustainability, master degrees program, and development. Thank you, Professor Jawad, again for attending our conference as a panelist. Last, but surely not the least, prominent figure of Afghan media, Lutfullah Najafizadeh. Najafizadeh Saeb is an Afghan journalist and CEO at Amu TV. an international media outlet for Afghanistan that he and his colleagues founded after the falls of Kabul in August 2021. At AMU, Najafizadeh and his colleagues are trying to revitalize free press in Afghanistan by connecting Afghan journalists overseas with those who are inside the country and providing free and unbiased reporting for people of Afghanistan. Najafizadeh serves nearly 2 decades of journalism experience, including leading Tulu News from 2009 until 2001. He led the largest news operation in the country for over a decade. He's known for conducting many high-profile interviews with global leaders and hosted Afghanistan's only presidential debate in 2019. Among recognitions for his work, he won the Journalist of the Year award by One Young World in 2022. Paris-based Reporting Without Border Award awarded him with the prestigious Medal of Press Freedom Hero in 2016. Time magazine profiled him as a next generation global leader in 2016. And Forbes magazine selected him among the 30 under 30 Asia influencer in media in 2017. Mr. Najafizadeh was the only Afghan journalist who attended 2 rounds of civil society talks with the Taliban in Doha 2019 and in Oslo 2022. He's a former fellow with the Institute of Politics, University of Chicago 2021 till 2022, Asia Society 2012, the Atlantic Council 2019, the Rumsfeld Foundation 2016, and the World Press Institute 2010. Giving these short bios of our distinguished panelists, we'll definitely have a very lively discussion about media of Afghanistan, media system of Afghanistan, basically how was it structured and why was it structured the way it was structured. Once again, thank you very much. I will start by asking Professor Washma Osman, and just one note I want to tell those who are joining us through Zoom and also YouTube. If you have any questions, you could easily write on the main chat of Zoom, or also you could comment to on YouTube, where all more colleagues are collecting those comments. Then we will raise those questions during our discussion. So yeah, I'll also start by asking a question from Professor Washma Osman, and before, if there is any points that I have missed or you want to talk, the floor is open. Once I name your turn, you could speak. Professor Washma Osman, thank you very much. And we understand that it's too early there in the United States. We really appreciate your time and your contribution. Let me first just asking about, since this conference is about the media system of Afghanistan, when we say media system, what does actually it really mean? The concept of media and its elements, what comprises the media system?
Thank you, Azra John. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, please, yeah. My voice is quite...
It's nice to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this discussion with the esteemed panelists, Professor Jawed and esteemed journalist and producer, Lutfullah Najafizadeh, and the questions from the audience as well. So I think in terms of media systems, you know, I have my PhD in media studies and communication. The way it's conceptualized, at least here in the States, and excuse me if my voice sounds a little weird, I'm recovering from COVID myself. But the way we conceptualize it here is that there's 3 different types of media systems. So you have the commercial type of media system, which is what the American model is mostly. So it's based on advertising, you know, it's very corporatized. Corporations have a lot of power, you know, there's been a lot of commentary about how because of the corporate aspects, it can not be very democratic as it claims to be. You have the what's called the public service or the public interest model, which you know, sometimes the European countries, especially some of the more socialist countries, are categorized as, and those countries, the media funding and financing tends to come from taxes and from the government, and tends to, you know, in an ideal case scenario, have more programming that is for the public interest and for information and for news, as opposed to for sensationalism and just for entertainment and just for ratings. And then the third model that you have is, of course, the authoritarian model, which oftentimes countries where there's media repressions and the media laws are against freedom of speech, are categorized as, and you know, some examples of that would be Russia, China, and many, many others. So if you look at Reporters Without Borders, they have the freedom index. The ones that are lower on the freedom index tend to fall into that. In my research, and you know, in my book, Television and the Afghan Culture Wars, I look at particularly television in Afghanistan, and I interviewed over 100 different people across different television stations, including Tolo TV. I argue that it's a newer model that we see, which is a development model. You have so much money, an influx of funding coming from the international community, a good amount of that is from the US. And so we can talk about what are the impacts of this particular media model. And what we talk about is the political economy. So the politics and the economy of any media organization has a direct bearing on the type of content and the type of programming. So I'll leave it there and we can talk more.
Thank you very much, Professor. Yeah, that's a broad explanation of the concept of the media system and the types of the model that exist. Of course, there are two different models still, but that are the dominant ones. Now I will give the floor to Mr. Najafiza about his experience. He was in Afghanistan, and particularly in media and different aspects. And Najafiza, how do you see the journalism or the practice of journalism of the past 20 years? Later on, we could discuss more the current situations too, but overall, can you give a broader image of the past 2 decades media in Afghanistan?
Well, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues and friends. I see some familiar faces, familiar names. It's an honor to be on this panel with Ms. Osman and Professor Jawad. It's good to be with you. And thank you, my friends at Leipzig University, for organizing this. My take is that the Afghan media, particularly in the democratic Afghanistan, starting in 2001, was responding to a thirst of decades for information, for freedom. And as a result, it's somewhat revolutionized the country, the society. And it is certainly, it was, and I still believe it is, to an extent, a success story of Afghanistan. It provided opportunity for people to express their views, their thoughts. The people of Afghanistan have been silenced for decades, and luckily, after the changes in 2001, the Constitution guaranteed free speech and press freedom in the country, and that gave the people of Afghanistan a unique space, a new space where they can interact and engage. So I think that set the foundation for a very, very vibrant Afghan media that 2 decades later, we could see that it became one of the strongest pillars of democracy in the country, as well as a very influential force in the society. It had its, of course, its downsides as well. We can discuss that, its shortcomings, but it's nowhere close to the amount of success that the industry has achieved. And as a result of that, massive, I would say, achievement, the media is still standing, still fighting back, still trying to navigate the space, given that this is a new terrain right now. This is a new playing field. So to me, because of that strength, the media is still relevant today. So I'm very honored and pleased that I've been part of the Afghan media family, and I hope I still am. And this is something that we should all be very proud and happy for it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, there are too many reports about the success, media as a success stories, and also, as you mentioned, the downside of the media too. We will go deeper into that part. But before that, let's give the floor to Mr. Jawad about telling us, as it was mentioned before too, when we are talking about the media systems, one of the main elements of the media systems is the ownership. And in Afghanistan, we had different types of media that was owned by the government and different other actors too. So could you please tell us a little bit more about the ownership, actually, who owned the real the power on the media, who had the final say when you're talking about the ownership of the media?
Thank you, Dr. Abazal for inviting and giving opportunity, and thank you, Leipzig University, for conducting such a very vibrant discussion regarding the Afghan media system. And I'm honored and privileged to be in the panel with Dr. Osman and Najafiza, that said far away. And regarding your question about the ownership of Afghan media for the past 20 years, it depends on the source of the media, where the foundation of the media or the establishment of the media, when it was financed or granted or giving funded, from where. That is why, as Professor Osman said, that we did not have a very vibrant model, or we cannot bring all the systems in one model under definitions of one model, because of that diversified source of financing for our media. We had ups and downs, both the happy part, the very parts of media in Afghanistan that we can celebrate, we can be proud of. At the same time, we had, because of the ownership, it depends not only for liberal radio or televisions or whatever outlets, but that it was ideological at the same time, that it was also partisans or functional. It depends on who put the foundations of the media in Afghanistan for the past 20 years. That was very concerning questions. How one of your keynote speakers talk about the narrative. but because the narrative was not very diversified or polarized because of that ownership, the ownership model. It was not only private, but we have the government state run media in Afghanistan. We have some media that was influenced or directly established by the parties, by the previous warlords, or at the same time, we have the business area that on the business prime that whoever put more focus on business and had some kind of leverage on the area style they are doing. It was because of the whoever put the foundations, the source of the money, because media system was monetized in the country at the same time that we have the diverse voices in the country. It was a kind of monetizing the system too, because the sustainability issue raised from this concern that if we put it in a way, it was all about from none to existence in a flux, because of 2001, it was a kind of, as Najaf Izal explained it, evolving or a revolution for the media. It because of the context was very less or less prepared for having that many media in Afghanistan at once. That was why it was a kind of exploited in many areas because of the people that they want to have a kind of a system that they should have some money, some generations, that it was not because of being a media savvy people to be professionally acting on the market. If you find money, okay, good. But it was more to have a media, to have a system of generations for fundraising, especially from the international donors. That was why we have less sustainable media system in the country. And those that they are still exist and they can operate, they were good in the area of business, and they were thinking in a way that it was more professional in terms of modern media. But those they were still thinking about only generations of money throughout projects, that was less successful in the system. But we cannot define a very narrow system for Afghan media for the past 20 years, because we have liberations, we have authoritarian approaches, we have ideological approaches, and we have a business-oriented approaches. It was a mixture of all that. But if we compare none or existence, better to exist it, better to have it, because the number was so high, we could not reach the quality in a way to make more our system sustainable. But since it was abruptly experienced a new wave of changes at once, most of the media could not exist and could not go. And even the current ones which go, it goes with very less, and they are not able to do and to pay good salaries for their people. And as many left the country, that is what they are struggling. But still, we are hopeful that they are very active in lifeline programs, and they are doing their job in many other ways, which are still very vibrant and effective for the communities and for the country overall. Over.
Thank you, Jawad. Yeah, I will be asking the next question from Professor Wajma Osman, because we still want to go more deeper into the media system and the concept of the media systems. Since in the past 2 decades, Afghanistan was founded as a democratic country, and the system was also more liberal compared to the regional countries. But there are some criticism about the system and the model of media of Afghanistan. The criticism is that the system was not properly or it was not very contextualized in looking into the community of Afghanistan, the culture, to the social aspect of Afghanistan. So the question is how the media system was contextualized, or was that compatible into the very fabric of the Afghan community?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think this was one of the challenges of the way media development occurred in Afghanistan, was that some people argued that there's too much foreign programming because, for example, there were dramatic serials from many different countries because it's cheaper to buy them, at least initially, for the TV stations. Or there was all of these reality TV programs that were based on foreign reality TV programs, but then made into an Afghan version of them. So I think you had many different, if we're looking particularly at the television systems, you had many different television channels. And in my interviews because I interviewed people, media professionals who are working in production, but I also interviewed audiences and people, everyday people who watch TV. And I think across the board, it seemed that people enjoyed the foreign programming. Of course, there was the multiple attempts by the Shura and other conservative groups to ban some of the foreign programming because they thought it was corrupting women and the youth and so forth. But in my interviews, it seemed that most people enjoyed the foreign programming, but they also appreciated and perhaps in some cases enjoyed the local programming more. So the local programming, everything from the talk shows, the political shows, the cooking shows, the call-in shows. There was the various political satire and comedy shows that spoke to a world of Afghan values and Afghan inside jokes and systems that they appreciated. So I think it was a mixed bag. I mean, I'll make a before I'll finish by saying that a good comparison would be, because I've also studied the media system of here in the United States, where I've spent a good part of my life. Here, people think it's a democratic system, and it is in many ways, but there's also corporate censorship of foreign programming, right? So, for example, Al Jazeera, you can see throughout Europe and other countries in the Middle East, but you don't have Al Jazeera had a very difficult time trying to locate space on television and on cable, and there was many challenges, and ultimately it failed. So there's attempts to keep foreign programming out. And if you look at some of the Central Asian countries like Kazakhstan and others, they also have quotas, they have limits, so that they don't want too much foreign programming. But in my view, as long as you have a vibrant, original local programming, it's important to have foreign programming too, because foreign programming introduces people to outside cultures, to cosmopolitanism, to ideas and all types of things. The problem is a situation if there was only foreign programming. And I think maybe on some television stations, there was too much of that, but other stations did a better job of balancing that. So I'll leave it there.
Oh, thank you very much, Professor Osman. And now we'll ask again Najafiza Nasa, because you had an experience of Afghanistan almost 20 years, and you recently established a new TV, Amu TV, in exile. And can you link these, or can you tell more about your experience and the differences between today's approach toward media, particularly when you're talking about Amu, in your past experience in Afghanistan, how similarly or how differently you're following your approach, or how different your current approach is from the one that you had in Afghanistan?
Well, we tell the Taliban that politics changed, that the society has not changed, the ethics of media has not changed. So we are the same journalists as we were 2 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 10 years ago. For that matter, we follow the same universal ethics of journalism for news coverage. In terms of what audience need, I think we have to see what is accessible today for the people of Afghanistan and what's not. For instance, music is banned in that country. How can we address that vacuum? Foreign content is banned. How can we address that concern, if that is a concern? Although, from what I remember, we've been exposed to Indian movies and all that, all our lives. So there has been a degree of reliance for entertainment on international content throughout the history of the country. But anyway, so I don't see an ideological or a policy shift per se, given that the Taliban are back to power today. But it has definitely affected the way we operate, with security questions, with the access to information question, with, I think, objectivity. The country was used to produce 200 hours of political commentary in every 24 hours in that country. And some media outlets in the country were providing a platform for over 5,000 people every month. So 5,000 Afghans were appearing only on one TV channel to express their views. So is that a space still there or not? I think that is a question that we all have to dig deeper into it and find out whether we can address it or not. And the amount of objective journalism, I think, investigative journalism, has significantly reduced. So there are new front lines, I would say, for journalists and media activists. But it should not, and it has not, in my view, changed the way the beliefs of journalists. I do not think that the media in Afghanistan in the past 20 years was a byproduct of Western presence. The whole country, the economy, yes, was related, was connected to US and NATO presence. The economy was affecting the media business. We have a statistics here. If that is necessary, I think we can talk about that. That from an annual media market of about $100 million, the industry has suffered quite severely, and that is a fact. But if you compare it with our neighbors, with Pakistan, with India, Pakistan media market is I think it's well, now it should be more than half a billion dollars. India was already back in 2015 and 2016 at 1.2, 1.5 billion dollars. So compare Afghanistan with some of these, immediate market, financially speaking, because the question of dependency was raised. I think the market was very small. And towards 2020, 2019, 2020, 2021, we were talking about, I think, $20–30 million max. And that is probably the salary of one media personality in the US. So given how small the media market was, and given the amount of content that was used to produce and is still being produced, I think that is definitely, something that we all have to be very proud and happy, and the front lines, that the journalists keep pushing. Today, I'm very interested in if your program allows, to talk about the current challenges and how can we address them. But the past 20 years has definitely provided that back end, that support, that culture for us to navigate the current circumstances.
Yeah. Next, we could definitely discuss about those challenges, but specifically, as you mentioned before, that there are still some challenges in problem. You mentioned access to content and freedom these days. How do you these days from exile or tackling those challenges?
In our country, we're talking about over 10,000 media professionals, right? This is probably the one of the most agreed numbers. So 10,000 media professionals, maybe a couple of thousand have left the country. So 70–80% of media activists, journalists are still inside the country. As we speak, there are over 1,000 journalists being graduated from schools, from journalism schools across the country. And I wonder why sometimes. Maybe we ask Professor Jawad to stop educating more journalists until we find jobs for them. So this is the situation. We received over 500 resumes in a matter of 1 week for a couple of vacancies, and that is a very unfortunate situation. I think that there is a very massive unemployment in the sector, but at the same time, it's a bittersweet moment. It's also a very promising development that these journalists would like to be involved, would like to stick to their field, would like to push boundaries, would like to report on what they see around them. So that is a fundamental reason that platforms like Almu TV and others who are pursuing a hybrid model, for them to exist, to respond to the situation. It's not a new innovation. It's not sort of trying to create to something new. It's merely and primarily responding to a situation that's there. And at times it's quite difficult, especially for those of us who are abroad. But compare the Taliban from 1996 to 2001 to the Taliban in the past 2 years. Every day of the Taliban regime right now is being documented. If you look at to what is available during their 5 years of regime rule in Afghanistan in the 90s, because of a lack of media, because of no social media, because of lack of that sort of culture, there isn't much available, right, in the public space. But today is a different world. Yes, and we've had more than 200 cases of torture, arrests, and intimidation that have happened in the past 2 years. But at the same time, the amount of content that is being produced, Taliban officials are being questioned. Journalists are still trying to hold them into account. And we deal with them as well on a daily basis. We talk to them. They appear on our TV channel, and then we question them when it comes to human rights, when it comes to women's right, and all of that. So it's important for us basically to stay engaged, and I'm not sure if exile is the right term here, but I think it's important for us sort of to stay connected, to not divide the media sector into outside or inside, or pro-Taliban or anti-Taliban. Let's not politicize this sector, because we have invested a lot in blood and treasure, and this is a collective achievement. Let's just try to depoliticize it as much as we can, and keep it as professional as we can, in order for us to be able to sustain it long term. You never know what's going to happen 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, right? So we shouldn't compromise on our core principles and values.
Here, Najaf, I'm sorry. The word that you use, depoliticize, you say that let's try to depoliticize. Is it that what you learned from the past, or was the previous media highly politicized, or you're trying to make to depoliticize the current media?
Well, I mean, politicians try to influence media, right? In the past, and in the present situation, of all fronts. And our job is to make sure that purity of the profession remains intact and is protected.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's good points. We have some international media assistance organizations. I think they could have some takeaway from what you mentioned, that 500 vacancies. It means there are still potential in Afghanistan. So those who are interested in supporting current media in Afghanistan, there is space and there is potential. But the way they are supporting, that would be an issue, because that is also my question from Professor Jawad Saab. Like in the past 20 years, media was, as we conducted small research with particularly media practitioners and media owners in Afghanistan, and the majority of them were telling us that media was highly relied on international funding and international assistance. And we have also noticed that after the collapse of the government, almost half of the media immediately collapsed. Maybe there are many different reasons, but I think one of the reasons was the financial issues. So in the past 20 years, these international media supported, international media assistance or international donors supported Afghanistan. But as I mentioned, it suddenly collapsed. What does it mean? Did they not have a proper strategic plan how to support not only financing the system, but also to learn them to maintain or to survive political changes or some critical financial situations? Did they have, or did a proper system or strategy, or they were just supporting, funding the way they wanted because that was their on their agenda?
Bahar Saib, what we didn't like was a strategy in writing in paper or on papers, but for the implementations, to know or contextualize those strategies in a meaningful or sustainable way, it needs a kind of sustainability in this governance system in the country. If you, every 10 or 20 years, if you go ups and downs, the variance is 0 and hundreds, then because of the kind of governance that you want and the next A or B or Z want, if the difference is A to 100 or 1 to 100, that system overall stability of the system of governance can affect all other sectors, including media. that because of those strategies, if were not applicable for our agriculture, for our dams, for our electricity, for our employment market in many sectors, how could that be applicable, that a strategy could be maintained or can be sustained for the media sector? Because of if the overall system is somehow is affected, either positive or negative, we do not discuss that area, but whenever it is affected, the variance is so high and so loud and cloudy, then that strategy could not work because media for Afghanistan, especially whenever, as Najaf Izadeh asked, that the market was shrinked economically even for the past 20 years, rather than the 2 years, because of the very different situations that we are experiencing. But if we could sustain from the very naturals with the kind of real economic situations that the media can make it for themselves, the small pocket that they will have, and they make it in a professional way to make their way sustainable for the future, they can do it. But that abrupt change was not predicted first, and for many other sectors that we were not ready to respond. Media was part of that, especially for the financial reliance, for the very leading media outlets as movie groups is an example of that. We might go with that, but with a lot that they were subjected to closures, they were so reliant on the international projects, and they could not make it in a professional way if they practice media in a way to both make it from the business and moreover contextualize the content in a way to be catchy or impressive for the audience, they would sustain. But that kind of situation, which was not predicted for many other sectors, was not predicted for the media, and media could not be an exception for that.
Well, thank you very much. Professor Usman, yeah, we also just talked with Jawad saying about the funding. Why that very strategic and systematic strategy did not exist? Or was the media considered just as a means to achieve goals, or was the media per se the end? But as we see in the past, the media collapsed, and although with huge amount of money spent in media, but at the end of the day, although we were not saying that media does not exist in Afghanistan, but still the funding that was spent in Afghanistan was people could criticize that could be spent far way better than the way that was spent. So the question is, was the media developing the media system per se the very end, or was it just used as a means to achieve something else?
Azra John, if I'm understanding correctly, you're asking, was the media funding, or the billions of dollars that went to development of the media in Afghanistan, was that for the sake of media development, or was there other goals or incentives for foreign donors and the international community, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I think it's a question that everyone here has spent time considering why that might be. And so I mean, I think the short answer is it's probably both. If we think about the goals and incentives, it's a common practice with the United States and other nations when they are engaging diplomatically and politically, and in this case, you know, there's 20-year war with a country, that they invest money in the media, right? So this is across the board, happens, and that's part of, you know, if we think about it and not so, you know, diplomatic terms, we can think of it as propaganda. So it's, you know, it functions as media propaganda. You know, in my own interviews, once again, you know, when I spoke with people, and specifically with this question, people did not want to speak on the record. They wanted to speak off the record, and they wanted to speak anonymously. If you're a country, let's say the US was one of the largest donors to the media system, you're spending, you know, billions of dollars on media development, you obviously want that money to be spent to go towards ideologically favorable content, right? So you want content that is going to represent the interventions that the US was making in Afghanistan, militarily, development-wise, politically, in a positive, favorable way. And so I think there is some pressure when you receive money. And I think that's part of the reason why many of the television stations, including in my interviews with USAID and US diplomats, they would not reveal the exact numbers of how much, but there's plenty of information out there in, you know, articles by the New York Times and the New Yorker and others that show how much different media organizations were receiving. So even if they were not forthright and they didn't want to disclose how much money they were receiving, there's information that makes it clear. And so I do think part of it, you know, was because they have specific goals, agendas, and incentives. And this is common practice across the board when, you know, more powerful countries engage with countries that are in weaker state positions. On the other hand, I think there was also genuine interest by other people in the donor community, including the US, but also especially in maybe some European countries and some other countries where they really wanted media development as a way of, they believed that media development could help with nation building, and that democratic processes could help with peace, and people being able to express themselves, and maybe on some bigger level beyond entertainment, some kind of healing from, you know, 4 decades of war and sectarian violence and gender violence and all of that, that perhaps the media would be able to genuinely bring about some positive change towards human rights, you know, ethnic diversity and pluralism, things like that. So I think that's oftentimes how I've thought about it, is that it's both.
And same, following the same with what you said, particularly about those international community, international media systems who genuinely wanted to develop and support the media system because they believed, or it is believed, that the media could support diversity, and media could support social cohesion. How did you see the particularly in this context, the role of Afghan media they played in the past 20 years? Did they achieve what the donors were expecting to achieve?
I think, you know, similar to what Lutfullah John was saying earlier, I think overall we can say that there was a degree of success. If you recall, even the MP Ramazan Bashar Dost had said that media is the only candle in the darkness in Afghanistan. So I think there was a level of success in terms of, you know, there was so much programming about ethnic diversity and how, you know, there was public information campaigns, we are all Afghan, you know, there was anti-war programming. And so I think many of those were successful and would resonate with people. But I think the converse of that, or the other argument, similar to what Professor Joid was saying, was that the media model we have in Afghanistan and where the funding and the political economy came from, you also had political figures and business elites and warlords who, you know, were big stakeholders. They were owners. And so I think those other segments of society use their capital that they've built through war economies in order to become media, you know, organizations. They were not media or journalist professionals to begin with. And I think they, on the other hand, did the opposite. So I think some of those media organizations, you know, would create dissent, continue to divide different ethnic groups, make inflammatory comments, and so forth. And I think one other thing I'll say is for some of the stations that were had more international funding and US funding, who tried to do human rights programming specifically for women and try to increase women's participation. On the one hand, they did a great job in terms of increasing women's participation. On the other hand, I think in some situations, they were so quick and keen to show the international donors that we have women on screen and, you know, women news presenters and women this, that they did not take enough time to invest in protecting them, because of Afghanistan was and still is a very dangerous environment for journalists, and specifically women journalists. So it took some time for some organizations to come up with plans of, you know, taking journalists by van and car to the location and other methods of safeguarding them. And many of them came under harm. So I think these are all things we need to consider when we ask the question of how successful were Afghan media organizations in meeting the goals of human rights and unity and peace and so forth.
Thank you very much. Najafizada Saab, as it was mentioned, the funding, their influences, and the particularly the editorial decision of Afghan media. How do you? It's not necessarily, you don't have to necessarily talk about your own experience, but generally about the overall situation in Afghanistan. How free it was. It's not because when we are talking about the freedom of media, one is one freedom of media is largely which is rated or measured by, let's say, about the Reporter Without Borders, because that put Afghanistan relatively in a good position compared to the regional countries that was ranked 120th, I think, in that region. But what I mean by freedom, free or freedom of media is the internal editorial decision did the international financing or supporting influence that internal decisions of media of Afghanistan? And the second question is about, okay, I think we could answer the first question. So the second question would be, was that good, that freedom of Afghanistan, given the fragile nature of the country and having that much freedom of freedom of media, was that good, or should that have some limited about the freedom?
Are you saying that we were freer than?
Let me paraphrase my questions. Yeah,
we really
since we talked
to?
about, yeah, since we talked about the international funding that was pumping into Afghanistan, so how did that impact the internal editorial decision of media? It's not only necessarily one media. I'm talking about the generally landscape.
I understood that.
Yeah.
But your second question.
The second question was, because there is general understanding that Afghanistan had a very progressive, liberal, free media. Was that good, given the fragile state of the country?
Well, I mean, I'm going to respond to the second question because that's really. Yeah,
we're also expecting you to share your insight about the first questions too. Your assessment about that. Yeah. Okay.
I will. Look. Even today, look at surveys. Afghanistan is a liberal society. It's a diverse society with deep traditions, but we are free people, right? That's why you have wars in that country. Maybe we express our freedoms in a most frustrating way, but that sort of sense of freedom in the Afghan society is proven throughout our history. So never say that we didn't deserve the freedom that we had, or we were too conservative of a society. I would be very offended, and it would be a very big disrespect to all the sacrifices of people in the media sector and beyond who have tried to protect our values, our freedom, and our diversity, and our love for our country. So that's one. Second, on funding, I think we are overstating the level of donor funding into the media organizations. I mean, I also as someone who managed a TV channel for a very long time, I can tell you that commercial advertising from energy drinks, from banking sector, was more than 2/3 of all revenues. So the 1/3-ish was probably coming from ISAF advertising, pro-ANDSF, anti-war advertising. So that's why I think it's a bit, if we have this understanding that the entire media sector was funded by the US Embassy, I think that's wrong. So let's put the records straight here. And second, for those of us who have worked with international organizations, some of them who are here on this call, and some Western governments, I don't remember an ambassador or a donor calling me and telling me that this is how you should put a story, because we're funding that show. I've never experienced it myself, so I can't say that I can't give away the ownership of what we have built, all of us, to somebody else because they were sponsoring a project or they were paying for a particular cause that was dear and important for all of us. So, but we are talking about the independent media, right? In that country, I also remember that on a very important big day, Newsday, I could see that one of the TV channels was running a speech of a leader of a neighboring country as their most important story of the day. So that was also a reality, but that was very, very limited, luckily. So countries in the region, certain individuals have their media channels. That's right. The Afghan constitution allowed political parties to have their media wings. So let's not mix that. Let's not mix the PR wing of a political party with the independent press. I think that's where, you know, the space becomes a little blurry for all of us, that which one was really the Afghan media. I think for me, one is that the entire media sector is standing today in a country that your head of a state fled, your entire army dissolved, right? But none of the major TV outlets, I don't work for them anymore, but I'm proudly speaking on their behalf. None of their TV channels even stopped their broadcasting for 1 second, right? If we don't see this, if we are giving this credit away, and we're saying, oh, we didn't own this, oh, this was because of the American boots on the ground, oh, this was because, you know, this is not Afghan, this has nothing to do with our culture, I think that's very unfair to say.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, I think the question for all of us is how to protect it now. Yes, thank God the Americans are gone. Thank God the money has dried. Okay, it's now our own responsibility. Okay, if it's dear to us, it's important for us. If it really belongs to us, let's talk about it. How to protect it from our own people, who are basically trying to tell us that we should. This is probably something that we don't deserve.
That was also my question to Professor Jawad, that, okay, the international media, international donors supported explicitly, implicitly, less or for that people could decide, and that needs to be, I think, further research. But what the Afghan community did get out of these support, particularly first, and secondly, how that what we still have in Afghanistan, that the current media, still there are more than 200 media outlets in Afghanistan operating, although there might be challenges, problems, but how that could be improved and how that could be sustained.
We have leading media in the country that still exist and still operate, but we cannot replicate those leading media for the whole media in the country for the past 20 years. Because what I have started with, that media was monetized in a way, not for business. If they are doing for business, I'm not against business. I support business, and whatever they can generate through advertisement, professionalism. Okay, this is a sector that you can make it, like if you can do it from the agriculture, why you cannot do it from the media? That is one point, that we should segregate it, or we should define it separately with whoever has put an investment on the media and made it on the leading and professionalism and for freedom and liberty to have the voices or diversity of voice. Nobody will argue about that. But what we argue is that if half of our media has gone because of the lack of professionalism, the lack of sustainable strategy for the media, it is not talking about a few the specific media here. We are talking about media system in the country. That is why we say and we see success in some media, but failures in many others, because of we cannot claim that all media were always on the shoulders of the donors whenever they gone, they all are gone to non-existence. It is a big claim, nobody can do it. But what we can say that the number of media that at once has dropped down is because of the system. The system was not based on more professionalism, more in a way to make for their audience and to approach their audience, to think about their needs. And that is why we need a kind of framing and agenda setting based on the national interest for the country. Perhaps we have experienced many governments throughout my age. I've experienced like 7 to 8 regime changes or government changes, whatever. But what we need, what we say, that those media, if they put the foundations based on the professionalism, based on the ethics of journalism, based on the commitment to serve the country throughout the needs of their audience, to say and inform them, to educate them, to entertain them somehow, because of the entertainment is now so close or so shrinked nowadays. But for the other two aspects, still the country needs them. Still we need to educate our people. For example, I train radios in the provinces, and they are preparing lifeline programs, how to feed your kids, how to make a minimum, for example, with your minimum income of 100 apps, how you can feed 2 times your children. This is the education that media effect. Nobody will argue about it. It has effect. We can serve it. We did serve in the past, and we can serve now too. For some very sensitive issues, still there are some restrictions, but the restriction is not applicable for all aspects of life, because I'm living in the country and I'm still in the country, and I follow all the media that is available somehow. That is why it is not a matter of who did what, but who has existed. It means that they were professional and be part of the legacy of the nation, not necessarily the legacy of a government, because of it is the people that they invested, and it is the people that need it. And still we go and have the media in a way to practice more with professionalism, with the ethics, with more way to serve the countries, to serve the needs of the people, and to say and how to raise from the very essence of the people.
Thank you very much. And Professor Usman, yeah, as we were previously mentioned about the model that media was supported in Afghanistan, and the context of Afghanistan, a fragile society that existed almost for 2 decades. And there is, and once again, a kind of discussion among these media international organizations that there is potential and there is interest and there is possibility that the international organization may once again start supporting media in Afghanistan. What would be your recommendation? Should they follow the same model that they did in the past, or because previously there was some criticism about their supports that it was a value added or a kind of agenda added support, and what you recommend for in the future if they are going to support media in Afghanistan?
I think that there's always going to be, if you have external backers that are not a part of the actual media organization, and many media organizations have that, including if you look at the media organizations in exile and the ones in diaspora that we can see on Jadu and other kinds of satellite TV. So there's always going to be that type of, you know, expectation of some kind of incentive or goal or agenda to impact content. But I think the thing to also remember is that within that, there's negotiation. So there's the levels of pressure or constraints or limitations really depend on a variety of factors. So oftentimes, media producers can negotiate and can still manage to reduce the editorial pressures and the editorial constraints. So to your question of, you know, there's international donors and countries who may be ready to start funding the media. And I don't know if they're going to fund it in the same capacity, if they're going to give as much funding and exactly what the longer term goal is, because, you know, for example, the US is not directly engaged militarily, you know, after 2021. I'm not sure what their agendas or goals would be. However, I think that when you're dealing with fragile countries like Afghanistan, and fragile, I mean that, you know, the court system was effective to a degree, but also corrupt. And same thing with many of the other systems of justice and policing. There was many problems. So you have to think about the protection of the journalists. And so who are in positions of management can, you know, they may not be on the front lines of reporting. And so they may have a level of protection from the dangers. And, you know, people in exile, and it makes sense to be in exile because it's safer to be in exile. But for the reporters and the presenters and the newscasters who are on the ground, it's very challenging. And one of the things that was that, you know, journalists and other media makers talked to me, especially those that were lower ranked, who were on the front lines, as we say, is that, you know, they had many challenges and pressures. And towards the end of the US interventions in the late 2010s, people were media makers and journalists were beginning to censor themselves more. So self-censorship was becoming more and more of an issue. And it makes sense because there was more deaths, there was more threats, more beatings, more arrests, more destroying of equipment, and so forth and so on. It was becoming more and more dangerous. So if the same type of media model is applied again, and you have money going into media organizations in Afghanistan or in exile, working with people on the ground there, we have to be very aware and cognizant of who is vulnerable and who we're putting at risk.
Thank you very much. Before coming to the questions of professionalism in practice from Najib Rizada Sahab, I would like to have Jawad Sahib's your thought about the same questions. If international communities, international donors are funding Afghan media these days or in the future, because there is a kind of discussion among those international organizations. Since you're in Afghanistan practically seeing all things, what would be your practical recommendation? Your mic is muted.
Three aspects can be very considerable. First and foremost, the background of the media, what were their operations in the past 20 years, how they did it, and how they practiced. That should be considered. If we have new emerging or new establishment, it means that we repeat whatever failures we had in the past. Second, how they can make them or how enable them to go to sustainability. If you're always on the shoulders of others, some days they will be very exhausted and they will take you off. And again, you will go and disappear. That is not the way that we should not experience again. It means for a sustainable, it should be a very systematic way that if they do it somehow, that should work for the sustainability of the media. And the third is that accountability and transparency. Whatever money goes, how what is the effect, what is the effectiveness, and what is the operation of that money? Really, that matters. Really, they pay off whatever they gain throughout professionalism, ethics, journalism activities. These three areas are very important, either international community or whoever comes up to support media, Afghan media. These three are the background, to think about the sustainability, and transparency and accountability is very important for media, because we should not, to whatever the money is pipelining, everything is good. Whenever it is cut down, the media disappeared. That failure should not be repeated, to my mind.
Thank you very much. And just to give a short reminder to those who are watching us, if there is any questions, you could directly write here on the Zoom, or you could also write. If you're watching us on YouTube, you could also leave your comments. Our colleagues will bring these questions here and we will raise. Although if you are almost in the very end of that panel. But Najafizad said, it was mentioned before that the professionalism issues in Afghanistan, good, bad, although the media just emerged early in 2021, but I think it was not get to the maturity level. So that was, although media system itself is a dynamic process, but media in Afghanistan was considered to be professionalizing in itself. And just to share your assessment or your view about how professional was the media, particularly media practitioner practically in Afghanistan, and how they were professionally dealing with some issues, particularly some sensitive issue, let's say about the election, during the election time.
Well, I mean, I probably, let others to judge professionalism of journalists in Afghanistan. But the fact that the industry has matured and expanded quite significantly, relatively speaking, compared to other examples in the region and beyond, is something for all of us to revisit and think about it. I think on what needs to be done, the female journalists of that country need immediate attention. Especially now that we hear that they're not allowed to go to journalism schools. So what is going to happen to them in the coming years? I think the situation is going to further deteriorate, I'm afraid, for them. So that is a responsibility on the shoulders of all of us. To find out how to help them and how to help, especially some of the very brave female journalists who have worked and stayed in that country for years. Second is I think training. I see a question also popping up, although that's for Professor Jawad, but I think that's a very relevant question, which is related to training from Mr. Subhani. That how what kind of education what kind of education are they really getting? Because that has been a question in the past. That is a question now. Training is important. It has to be prioritized. It doesn't have to be always about cash. I agree with Professor Jawad. I think in certain cases, especially now that it's a new terrain, it's a new game. We have to learn how to protect ourselves. We have to learn. I mean, all of a sudden, the country has turned into from a very vibrant space for media into one of the very closing spaces for media. So that abrupt change, as it was explained, needs some training for journalists to adjust themselves accordingly and to protect themselves and to be effective and to, of course, sustain the industry. So for that matter, I think a lot of training and education is needed. We have a lot of examples in the immediate region as well as in the far region to learn from it. Because if the situation is going to close down further, whether that is in the digital space, whether that is in the operational space, I think that is for all of us to think about it. And that's where I think some of the organizations who support Afghan media should also prioritize their programming. But at the same time, as you might have seen, there have been so many media outlets inside the country that also popped up in the past 2 years. I see a lot of new logos every time a Taliban minister talks, and most of these are Taliban-related affiliated media outlets. So we should also talk about them. What's their agenda? How professional they are? Which direction are they taking the country? And what is our responsibility to make sure that disinformation and misinformation and propaganda is not necessarily Talibanizing the entire country. So that is another big question on our shoulder. It's important to talk about past, yes, learn from our mistakes, but the fundamental question, as it's a bleeding wound, Afghanistan is, particularly the media sector, is for us to stop that bleeding, is to talk about it now, and then of course reflect on some of our failures and achievements alike. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Najafizad. As Jawad said, as there is a questions particularly to you that what professionalism or training, also Najafizad, as I have mentioned that about the training, but what type of training is necessary for the next generations, and what previous journalists actually lacked in terms of professionalism?
I will answer that later, because we got a question from Omid Sabhani that is asking about the future of those that they have graduated from journalism schools of the country in Herat, Balkh, Kabul, in anywhere in the country, or Host or Nangarhar. The other day I was entering the class that my students were all quiet and they were whispering and they were showing kind of, or displaying a kind of sadness. I said, what is the matter? What's the problem? They said that we saw a picture on the social media that one of our previous graduate, he is selling bolani. Those who don't know, bolani is about the dough and kind of potatoes. They put it on fry it on the oil. I stopped there and I was thinking, insidely, honestly, I was not had the courage, the kind of thinking or paradigm to convince them at once that how from journalism, if they are graduated and they have to sell something on the street. But knowing the situation, the shrinked economic situation of the country, and all sectors are kind of very narrowed down economically. So media sector cannot be exceptional, cannot be very vibrant or very money generating. That is why I gave my point of view that, okay, let's be hopeful for the future. We do and continue and pursue our professionalism, our training, our educations for hoping a good day to come. If that day comes and we are not ready, then can we be at once ready? The answer is no. That is why we are following, and even jokingly, or I don't know, seriously, Najib Zoda asked me that we should stop. For this case, because of the situations with my 45 years of age, I went a lot of ups and downs in the country. Even the days of turmoil that I cannot say it and cannot make you sad. Hey, but we stand and we make ourselves educated and we make ourselves prepared for a brighter, for a day that come, and we should use our professionalism, our educations, and our talent and competency in a way to be applicable and to be very well receiving. That is why still I recommend and still I insist and encourage my students that, okay, we will make it. The good day will come. The flourishing days will come. The economy will become better. If we do the very least that we have today in our hands, and we are committed, and we do that, we can do something good for this nation, for this country. Because all the time that if we encourage our people to go away, it is not a solution. Nobody accept all the 40, 30 millions of this nation. And you know, the kind of treatments of our neighboring countries against us. That is why we should encourage our people. We should give them hope and we should stay with them to go and flourish. This is for Subhani that, okay, keep continue. I know it is the market is shrink, but future can be brighter. If we should be ready for that. For training, that what kind of training media needs for the time being, one of the kind of negligence or the kind of nepotism was in some media were going on in the past 20 years was that even in the time that we graduated from journalism school, people were from the other sectors or from high school because of the payment, because of the kind of connections that they had, they were hired. Because of what we don't have in this country is the accreditations of every task. For example, in the Western countries, if you do and go and register your name for painting the walls, they ask you a certificate for that, and accreditations for that, and a license for that. But for this country, if we do continue that only we should go for each sector, their own people, their professionals should be hired, that is one strategy or tactics that can work. And for the time being, we need to go with our, especially we should, in the big cities, we are good with our media and professionalism. Whenever you go far away, because I work in many remote areas in radio with radio journalists, you see that the new generations need more kind of thinking how the write a script, how to deliver it, how to make a way that they sustain in their media, and the media operations go according to journalism, according to ethics. Even sometimes whenever a moderator is asking questions, at the very on the spot, he is sitting on the chair of the guest and giving some advices for the people. Man or women, just stay on your moderation aspects. That the very tiny things in journalism, from the ethics throughout the interview techniques, throughout the gathering of news, throughout the how we can not be deceived by the disinformation or misinformation. These things are the very core of journalism that for the generations that they come to work, they should be taught. But those that are graduated from high journalism schools, they know in the nutshells these stuff.
Thank you very much, Jawad Saab. Although we had some left behind questions, but I think we are almost running out of the time, and some of our guests and panelists are must be leaving. I think, yeah. Once again, thank you very much for your participation, for your thought, insight, sharing your experience, views. I think that was interesting, nice, and that there was many points that could be taken away. And yeah, thank you very much again. And now we have the next panel, but before that, we have some half an hour break. I think we could make that, we could have that break now, and we will have the second panel in 30 minutes. Once again, thank you very much, Professor Bashma Usman and Najafizada Saab and Professor Jawad Saab. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Najafizada.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Khuda Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz.